Hello and welcome back to the semifinals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. I thought that for the remaining games I will show a 3 and a 2 player game both from Group 1 and Group 3 to bring those groups to a close. If you want to see games from Group 2 then check out PV4's channel, he covered the group himself. And today we are starting with another 3 player game from Group 1. And if I have the standings correctly in mind that we have after the 3 games that we have seen so far, then those are the 3 players who are doing the best so far. And of course, it will be interesting to see how they will play against each other. Also, if you are interested in taking a look at another game of this group, then check out Eepogi's channel. He covered, I think, a 2 player game against Blunderteig. He did it spoiler free, so you can take a look at the video without the fear of getting some spoilers for the standings if you haven't seen them already. Alright, and now without further ado, let's take a look at the game, or maybe first let's quickly also take a look at the 3 player ratings. Here we have the overall ratings. You can see Mortar is rated best, but all have a very good rating. And then the 3 player rating, we can actually see that Palino is the highest rated player there, interestingly, but maybe also not surprisingly, as he had some very good performances in the Transcontinental ladder, and maybe that just adds up and puts him here as the highest rated 3 player player of the bunch. Alright, but now let's take a look at the game. Alright, here we are at the game, and as before, I don't know anything about what happened in the game, so it will be also very interesting to see that for myself. And first of all, we can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. We can see some theater synergy in H3 with Marlene Dietrich, Chaplin in the Hollywood. There are also Anthony Gaudi and Shakespeare in H2, but no Bach. We have Gates, Sid Meier, Einstein, and Marie Curie for some lab synergy. There's also Spaceflight. There's no Red Cross, no Manhattan Project, also no Gandhi. In H2 we are missing some strong wonders, no Suez, no Ocean Liner, no Harvard College. We have the railroad though. There are all the 3 military action leaders, then the culture leaders Anthony Gaudi and Shakespeare, Cook without Suez and Maria without Ocean Liner. We have in H1 one military action leader with Joan of Arc, Genghis Khan to help with the strength, Leonardo but no Gutenberg, there's Columbus as a nice transitional leader, Saladin as a very solid leader, we have Silk Road but no Universitas, both Himeji Castle and Great Wall, the Machu Picchu is there. And Eepogi is playing in first position in this game, and he starts by taking the Acropolis. Not a completely obvious choice, I would say. A bunch of wonders that he could choose from. Colossus maybe not being as strong without a Suez Canal being the game, but Aristotle maybe also could have been a very fine pick, but maybe Eepogi is fine with potentially getting Caesar, because Aristotle will very likely be taken away, but I mean Caesar with a little bit of additional strength from Acropolis could be fine. If he's looking for Caesar, maybe he could have also gone for the Colossus, but maybe the Acropolis is just more flexible, and let's see what he will go for at the next turn. Mortar will then go for the Colossus. I think he likes the wonder quite a bit, and he takes that together with Aristotle. And Palino will then take the engineering genius and the patriotism, is not willing to go for the hanging gardens, rather lets himself open for potentially the library or maybe the Colosseum that could come down the row. Now it's Eepogi's turn. Let's see if he indeed goes for Caesar or is maybe planning to do something different. No, he's just going for Caesar. He is playing in first position. He has a bit of an additional strength with the Acropolis. He is of course now playing against the Colossus with Caesar, which is maybe not ideal because Martin might have an even better advantage for both strength events and colonies, but at least he can maybe still dictate the event deck a little bit. Martin then goes for Aristotle, builds a mine, increases his population and takes the urban growth. So a very standard turn, nothing special. Palino goes for the Colosseum. He could have waited for the Silk Road here, but it also takes a lot of civil actions, and if he's maybe planning to go for Ashoka now, which I think would be the most reasonable, then maybe it would be a bit of an action overload. Nonetheless, Silk Road as a first wonder is still quite strong, but it could also stay on 2 civil actions, so I think I can understand that he didn't want to go for that here. Instead, he goes for the Colosseum, takes Ashoka in hand, builds a mine, increases his population, and then can elect Ashoka maybe at the next turn and take some cards with other colors. Eepogi seeds, opens the development of settlement. He seeds again, has drawn 2 events, opens the development of crafts. That could have allowed him to finish the Acropolis, but he also still wants to get the resource production quicker, at a science production. It allows him though to spend 2 civil actions to build a lab and a step instead of having to grab a yellow card. He will then take the alchemy to maybe further boost his economy. Martha's Seeds as well opens the development of religion. I think all of the players have a free population if I've remembered correctly, and then he is going for iron for 3 here. And that is maybe a little bit of a theme for him. I think we have seen it, I'm not sure, maybe even in all of the games, no, probably not, but we have seen it, I think, at least 2 times out of the 3 games that we saw. I think maybe I'm also mixing up some things, but generally I would say it gets more and more common in 3 and 4 player games that the first copy of Iron is actually taken for 3. I think I have seen that quite often recently. Maybe you can let me know in the comments if you noticed that yourself as well. So Martha has the additional science from Aristotle, has actually enough science to go for the Iron already. The next turn is enough resources to go for 2 upgrades. So yeah, it might just be very well worth it to secure himself that possibility. Palino goes for Ashoka, builds the second lab, takes the warfare and the breakthrough. Could have taken the bread and circuses to get the full Ashoka bonus, but there's no Pierre in the game, and a breakthrough for 1 civil action is of course also a very great card to take. And we can see the Silk Road would have indeed stayed on 2 civil actions. Eepogi seeds and opens the development of science. He seeds again, so the event deck is flipped very, very early. He opens now the development of civil life. Will use that, I think, to increase his population. And when we take a look at the event deck, he has actually seeded lots of events. I think 5 by him and only 1 by Martha. So Eepogi having lots of knowledge about the event deck now. Or 4. We have, of course, only 5 total events in a 3-player game, but 4 events by Eepogi, 1 by Martha Pêcheur. Eepogi will then finish the Acropolis this turn. Could have gone for the alchemy already this turn, but instead rather wants to get the monarchy going, has now more civil and military actions, and then takes the cultural heritage. With that he can go for the alchemy at the next turn. Martha seeds and opens the new deposits. Palino gets the most resources out of it, but it's relatively equal. Maybe one of the events seeded by Eepogi as a somewhat neutral event, or maybe seeded by Martha with taking the iron, hoping that it maybe would take a bit longer until it is revealed, while he now gets less resources out of it than he could have after his turn. At least he can also go for 1 more upgrade, so that's maybe a bit of a consolation prize. And then he also takes the warfare, which maybe allows him later on to keep more cards in hand. With the Colossus also scores him a science with Aristotle. Interestingly, he's not willing to take the monarchy here. Palino goes for building a warrior, maybe wants to be prepared for the event deck, doesn't want to be the weakest, and then he finishes the Colosseum and takes the monarchy. And now he has the full Ashoka bonus. Monarchy may be a bit awkward with already having the Colosseum. I think with having that in the 3rd military action, I often rather like to wait for an H2 government form, but getting more civil actions going, of course, can still be quite nice. Eepogi opens the immigration. That actually gives Palino an additional population. He just got the additional happy face from the Colosseum. Eepogi then with the 2nd politics action offers the open borders agreement to Palino. Has now actually 5 military actions for the moment. He will play the cultural heritage. Thanks to the new deposits and thanks to the cultural heritage, he will now be able to go for 2 alchemy upgrades if he wants to, but instead he rather grabs the iron, interestingly, costing him an upgrade, but securing himself that copy of iron, which he maybe can still go for in the near future. Maybe there's even an event in there that gives additional science, which could allow Eepogi to go for the iron even quicker. He is ignoring those military attacks. Martha also wants to have his own pact, but it gets rejected. He wanted to use resource as food, which seems like a good idea with having that much resource production, but Eepogi rejects the pact. Martha then also gets a bit stronger, develops the warfare, finishes the Colossus, and then takes the knights. He could have maybe also thought about finishing Colossus, taking Himeji, but there are maybe some other interesting wonders to come, and having a military tech, of course, quite strong, and he also now scores an additional science with Aristotle. Then it's Palino's turn. He will build another warrior, making him the strongest. Goes for the monarchy with the breakthrough. to get more civil actions, increases his population. He will now go for the Eepogi castle, using the additional resources that he has from Ashoka, has even enough to finish it already at the next turn. Doesn't get additional food for now, but still an additional resource production at least. Eepogi seeds, it looks like he probably didn't seed any strength events, or maybe it doesn't have a nice way to get stronger, and the Dark Ages are revealed, but actually no science at all is lost, so with that also not doing the upgrade makes now maybe more sense, with there being a chance of Dark Ages being revealed. That science would have now just been lost. Now Eepogi goes for the additional upgrade. He can then go for Iron at the next turn if he wants to. If he doesn't want to go for Knights, takes the Engineering Genius and also the Irrigation. Mortar seeds and opens the reds. That hits himself quite harshly here, I would say. He didn't increase his population that much. Now he is stuck at 1 warrior. That could be annoying. I think that is definitely quite a setback for him. He then takes the Code of Laws with Aristotle, the Bread and Circus. Now he could develop the Code of Laws, and then with his big resource production, he probably needs to look into taking some wonders to be able to spend his resources. Palino seeds, the event deck flips, the raiders are revealed, so there's actually one strength event. Eepogi and Mortar will now lose some food or resources. For the next event deck, we can see that Palino is the one who has seeded 1 event, both of the other players have seeded 2. Then Palino this turn finishes the Eepogi castle, is now at 3 culture reduction, decides for Saladin as his leader. Could have gone for Michelangelo, maybe is a bit of a greedy culture leader, but as soon as he goes for his leader, he is very low in resource production, so maybe going for a lot of wonders isn't really that easily possible, and I think getting the 6th civil action now on top with Saladin on top of his monarchy is quite nice for him. He even takes the Code of Laws, could even go up to 7 civil actions at the next turn if he wants to. Eepogi seeds, still isn't worried about being the weakest, and opens the Knowledge of the Ancients. He seeds again, opens the Pestilence. Now, together with the reds revealed earlier, that starts to get quite annoying for Mortar here. I think that is quite an annoying setback for him now, losing even an additional population after the 5 food reds loss. Eepogi then this turn will go for 1 iron upgrade, takes the rich land and the theology. He needed to lose some resource because he first lost some food from the reds, and then he didn't have any food to lose any longer for the raiders. Mortar Pêcheur seeds, opens the developed territory. He is willing to bid, even though he's low in population, but at the end Palino is the one winning it for 1 warrior, so that's, I think, a very nice deal for him. Mortar goes for Isabella, doesn't want to go for Genghis Khan, has now even more resource production. Let's see if he will go for the Taj Mahal. I think he has to. I think he might just take it and finish it. Yes, I think he just needs to invest his resources, and at least he's now passively producing some culture, so that might be nice. At the next turn he's just enough food to increase his population, even when he loses the 2 yellow tokens to the end of the age. And I think Isabella's blue tokens actually also were helpful to get out of corruption. Palino seeds, the foray is revealed, so now Eepogi gets a bit punished by being the weakest for a long time, and I think for Palino those additional resources are quite helpful, as he is relatively low in resource. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually goes for the Great Wall here. He also needs something to invest into. Maybe he also goes for something like alchemy or maybe irrigation, as we can see here. So he rather wants to let himself open for an H2 wonder, but I think the Great Wall could have been interesting. But he gets now a lot of food production going, and it of course also will be helpful for him to get some more strength, and maybe Eepogi Castle and plus Great Wall could be a bit of overkill, but I actually think that might have been an interesting pick here. H2 starts now, and he has also, Palino has now lots of actions and military actions, so that's not looking bad. His resources and science production, though, is not that great yet. Eepogi continues upgrading his economy, has now all of his mines fully upgraded, goes for Columbus, who is a very nice leader to get at the end of the age. He gets now even a shot immediately at maybe hitting the jackpot and getting an H2 colony. Mortar seeds and opens the Call to Arms. Eepogi again getting hit by a strength event. Palino now also losing a civil action, but I think for him it's not too bad with having that many. Mortar has just enough food to increase his population. Takes the journalisms actually, and actually can increase his population again. I think he got 3 additional food from the foray. And yeah, now he has a happy population that he can start putting into journalism, getting more culture production and also getting a bit of economy, but he still then doesn't have a lot of population to go into military. At least the Colossus and warfare strength is quite helpful for him to not be that much in danger. And he, interestingly, is actually building an additional warrior. Maybe he's expecting a strength event to come. That, of course, means that now he doesn't have a free population for journalism at the next turn any longer. So, interesting that he still was willing to go for it. Maybe he wants to go for something like statue first at the next turn. Let's see how he will do it with the journalism. I'm interested to see that. Or maybe there's a colony coming, that of course could also be the case. Or, of course, a big strength event, Palino seeds, and Amata getting an additional yellow token, so that warrior paying off very quickly. Eepogi losing another strength event. Palino increases his population, takes the reserves and the engineering genius. So just takes some yellow cards, doesn't take the coal, but probably it won't be taken away. Eepogi does use Columbus immediately. He even had some additional draws now with the call to arms. But it seems he didn't get an H2 colony, but he probably has the best H1 colony, gets the vast territory 1, so that's certainly strong for him. He goes for the knights, builds one, copies the medieval army tactic, takes the selective breeding, is willing to take it even though he has the irrigation in hand. Instead is also denying it from Marta Pêcheur, who can't go for it early now. Eepogi also now being the strongest. Marta seeds. And there is indeed a colony revealed. He is able to win it. For just a warrior, actually willing to pay 6 resources, but yeah, I mean, better than sending an additional warrior, I think, at this point, because he has more than enough resources, but is low in population. And now we can see building that additional warrior totally made sense now. I mean, maybe also a bit lucky that those were the exact events that were on top, but still, he won a strength event, he won a colony, and now he can actually still go for journalism. But interestingly, he goes for the scientific method here. Maybe wants to go for the less greedy play, the more economy-focused play, takes the architecture and then can continue upgrading his labs, maybe also go for an H2 wonder at some point more efficiently. And again, he builds a warrior. Because of that, maybe he didn't want to go for journalism, maybe he has some knowledge about more bad strength events to come. Palino this turn goes for the coal. He can go for 1 upgrade, even 2 if he is willing to play the reserves for resources. He takes the patriotism, the cannons, and the wave of nationalism, so instead of going for the additional upgrade, he rather takes some yellows. Maybe instead of the wave for something, he could have gone for the additional upgrade, being more action efficient, and having 2 additional resources by getting the upgrade earlier. But who knows, maybe he even has a war already and wants to save up some resource to go for military, for example, if he's drawn something like fortifications. I guess he doesn't have enough science to go for the cannons, if he doesn't get help from the event decks, but so probably he can't go for war something immediately the next turn, but that could maybe be a reason, and of course those are giving him some nice resources, so maybe it's fine to delay this coal upgrade by a bit. And actually we see maybe here the reason he doesn't want to stay the weakest. I just would have needed to wait until the end of his turn. That of course is a good reasoning, being now the strongest instead of the weakest, and then instead of getting the resources from the upgrade, he can take those good yellow cards. He has more than enough actions so that he hopefully shouldn't be in a civil action death or something. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He seeds and opens the good harvest, which gives Palino the most food. And Eepogi needs a new leader after he used Columbus, gets Maria, who is a very strong leader, especially in 3-player games. He can increase his population this turn, goes for an additional lab, which gets him out of corruption. He has now lots of science, can easily go for an H3 government form in later on, and maybe next turn can start going for selective breeding upgrades. Marta opens another colony, the strategic territory 1, so but this time he isn't able to win it, and interestingly, Eepogi is actually able to win it. Let's see if he will use that to transition into a new tactic, or if he just really wanted to have that colony that allows him to now cheaply rebuild his units with Maria. Marta plays the patriotism, making space in his hand. Interestingly, goes for the navigation. It's really looking like the armor colony is coming. There's an H2 event on top. I would not be surprised if that is a strong colony that he now really is trying to win with 4 colonization plus Isabella's bonus, so you can't be a lot better prepared like Marta is in this situation, and he will then increase his population with the last civil action and uses the resource from the patriotism to go for another warrior. Maybe it looks a little bit awkward with those warriors, but if there are indeed more colonies coming, then those warriors might actually turn out to be very useful for him. Oh, now there's a war happening. So I actually called a war, but Palino is going for a war without going for any military tech, or probably not any military tech. He has the Colosseum. He can actually go for the Rifleman for only 4 signs, so I very much expect him now to go for the Rifleman and use them to go for a respectable amount of strength. He plays the reserves, the patriotism, the wave of nationalism only for 3 resources, so not the ideal amount of value to get out of it. He then goes for the Rifleman, builds an additional one, and just goes for a lot of upgrades, and with that should be able to steal some yellow tokens, is even willing to take the strength from Saladin, so let's see how Marta will be able to defend at his next turn. He doesn't have enough signs to go for any military attacks, so that war might be quite annoying for him actually. Eepogi seats. And there's indeed a colony on top. Marta is willing to bid for it. The others are actually both passing. I mean, Eepogi doesn't have any units, so he can't bid on it. Palino is at a war, so Marta wins that one very, very cheaply. But with that big colonization force, likely would have won it quite cheaply anyways. Eepogi then starts going for selective breeding upgrades, rebuilds some units, actually 2 knights instead of a warrior, and that means that he has the Hussars tactic is now 10 strength, takes the efficient upgrade and the urban growth. Marta seats. The Crusades are revealed, which is giving Palino now some additional culture. And then Marta is going for a Spear this turn. I think a very great leader for him, and normally in a very great situation in general, being able to now very cheaply go for the Republic. The problem, of course, for him being is that he is at a war now, so let's see if he is still doing the revolution, being willing to just lose a bunch of yellows. He at least has a relatively nice yellow bank, or if he is delaying the revolution. I think he's just going for it, because he can't really build a lot of military anyway. Yes, he is going for the revolution, goes for one more upgrade to have more science, builds a religion to get out of corruption, and then takes the Rifleman and the organized religion. So, no, I think that turn is strong for him, but of course would have been a lot stronger if he wouldn't have been disrupted by a war. So Palino now gaining some additional yellows, and with that getting maybe a bit of an advantage. Palino stealing 3 yellow tokens. Also being able to go for Spy, that science loss I think is extremely costly for Marta per sure, and Palino with being a 2 science production will profit from that a lot. Maybe he will even go for scientific methods now. Indeed, he will go for scientific methods, 1 upgrade, can't go for more, but soon he will be able to upgrade his economy even more. So I think that military push worked out quite nicely for him. Now he's taking the civil action from Saladin again, and is again at 7 civil actions to maybe take some nice yellows or something at the next turn. And actually the next war is happening. A war over territory, another one from Eepogi against Marta Pêcheur. Let's see if he will just go for another Hussars army, maybe for the strategy or something, I guess. Or is he doing something with cannons? That would surprise me. I think he is not going for the strategy, probably doesn't have enough actions to really implement that. Instead, he is just going for another army. He's now at 17 strength, and of course, some additional. Oh, actually, also is going for the monarchy quite cheaply. He has a lot of science, so up. Going now up to 6 civil actions might be a nice improvement, even though it's of course not ideal to go from monarchy to constitutional monarchy normally. While I think that is of course nice to go for that war, which will disrupt also Marta again, who, because of the spy, again can't go for any military attacks, so that spy really being quite bad for him, as otherwise he might have been able to threaten at least a decent amount of strength. But Eepogi is sacrificing a farm for that. With Maria being at only 1 farm is not ideal. Let's see if he will be quickly able to rebuild this farm. Something like freedom of movement would maybe be ideal. Maybe moving a lab or something into the farms. Marta seeds, the prosperity is revealed, not giving a lot of food here in this situation. Marta has lots of resources, can't maybe do a lot about his strength anyway, so he just finishes the Eiffel Tower, has now a lot of culture reduction from his wonders together with the Taj Mahal, increases his population, builds a warrior. Let's see if he will copy the Legion tactic. He indeed does. Maybe he's now a bit safer from aggressions and also takes the cannons. But losing now even 2 more yellow tokens I think will be quite harmful for him. Especially with not having been able to get any food production going. Is there actually still a copy of selective breeding left? First of all, there's a pact between Palino and Eepogi. Palino getting an additional resource production, Eepogi getting an additional food production, which will be quite nice for him with Maria. And actually one copy of selective breeding got discarded, meaning that Mortar for the moment is stuck on a very low amount of resources, which could cause even more problems very soon for him. Palino continues with some upgradings. I think goes for coal and for lab upgrade. Takes the revolutionary idea, goes for James Cook. I guess he didn't find the civil actions to take any of the other leaders. James Cook not being ideal, only giving him 2 culture reduction for now, but maybe there are some colonies coming that he now can do a higher bid on. And then he also takes the cavalryman, is nicely prepared for H3 tactics. With the end of Palino's turn, we are entering H3, so now of course it is time. Maybe we will wait to see the yellow token loss, which maybe gives a more accurate picture of how the situation really is. And now we can take a look at each player's position, and I will try my best to do a hat-trick here and guess for the third time in a row, the outcome of the 3-player game correctly. That's basically the double hat trick. And yeah, so let's see. Culture-wise, actually all of the players are very close. Mart having a slight lead, but it might get a little bit bigger as he has the highest culture production at the moment. Then Palino has a very solid production going now, 8 resource production. With that I think he has the highest production, even though of course Maria is also giving Eepogi some additional resources, some very solid science production with the revolutionary idea. He might be able to go into an H3 government form. He has all of the military techs that he needs. If he gets a bit lucky and draws something like modern army or positional army, he could threaten quite a lot of military. And also he did steal quite a bunch of additional yellows, meaning even though he's only on irrigation, he is on 3 farms and he might be able to get a bunch of population out. So I think his position is looking quite solid. Also having the Imechi Castle is of course quite nice in the late game. Then Mortar, I think he had this big resource production, got some strong colonies going. But he got hit by those wars quite heavily, was a bit low in science for a while, has some solid science and resource production, but his low amount of population I think will be a real burden for him. But he also has a lot of actions, maybe he gets some reserves, maybe he gets an early copy of mechanized agriculture, that could be a real help for him. Also he is still the weakest and he can't go for both the military tech and organized religion at his next turn, so he will remain weaker likely for a bit longer. So he has some issues, but if a player manages to maybe survive or win the game at the end with having a big bottleneck, then I think it's Mortar. I think he finds creative solutions to maybe work around that. And then we have Eepogi, who is maybe a bit limited in the amount of civil actions that he is having. He has developed a theology so he can fix the uprising that he has, but maybe he can't quickly go for a second farm, limiting the output of Maria Theresa a little bit. Maybe we'll go for the justice system now or strategy to get some additional actions and invest his science. So I think he has a solid position. Maria of course always has some potential, but if he doesn't get tanks soon, maybe he will be a bit limited with only having the Hussars tactic available. So for my guess, I think Palino has just maybe the well-balanced or the best balanced civilization, not really any bottlenecks, some huge potential for the military if he gets a bit lucky, but also is not lacking behind in culture, so I will predict him as the winner of this game. And while I definitely think that Mata has the ability to maybe work around some problems, I still think his position is problematic, and because of that I will guess Eepogi as the second place, and Mata I guess will lose this game especially. I moved the game a bit forward because of wanting to see the loss of their 2 yellow tokens for everyone, but of course the war is actually not evaluated yet, meaning that Eepogi will now steal another 2 yellow tokens from Martin. With that, I think it gets a lot more clearer for me. That maybe helps Eepogi, even that much, that he might also be able to win the game, but I will stick with Palino as my guess for the winner. Eepogi now is the second place, and now we can even see even more that Martin has some really big issues actually. Can at least go for the organized religion, but soon will famine issues, and with that I will predict him as the last place in this game. Eepogi is the strongest, and Seeds opens the refugees, so yeah, even more bad stuff happening for Marta here. Eepogi getting an additional population, which is especially valuable as he has Maria Theresa. He then takes the justice system, who knows, maybe that will also help him to get out of corruption. He takes the opera, doesn't go for theology, instead just builds an opera, and is now at 5 cultural production, 7 civil actions, so I think his position also looks quite solid. And he also, I think, definitely has the potential to win this game. Marta Seeds and a strategic territory is revealed. He still is a big colonization force, no Isabella any longer, but he is able to win that colony. Has to send his whole army away, which on one hand, of course, helps him a bit with his famine and happy face issues, but on the other hand, he loses another 3 populations, so it will be very interesting to see how it will work out for him, but also at least he has 4 additional strength. Maybe he has the chance to draw a good tactic or something, so I'm very interested to see how he will manage with all of the issues that he's having. Also, he needed to lose even another population because of the refugees has to lose an H1 mine. Yeah, I guess that is now really looking quite ugly for him. He is now going for the cannons, maybe doesn't want to be in danger of an aggression, wants to threaten a bit of strength, takes the military theory to make himself a bit safer, the urban growth, the oil, and now that he doesn't have any population, of course, one solution is to just go for even better technologies to get more outcome per worker instead of getting more workers going. So that could be a nice idea with going for the oil. There's also Marie Curie in the game. Palino Seeds and opens the vast territory. That would be a very nice one to win for Marta Pêcheur, but he isn't able to. Instead, Eepogi wins it for an Hussars tactic, which I think is not a big price for him, especially with having Maria to rebuild and to gain a lot of value out of this additional food and the additional yellows. When we take a look at the events, there's one H1 event on top that was seeded by Marta. Let's see if that will help him. Then one seeded by each from H2, and already an impact seeded by Marta Pêcheur, who had the Colossus draws. Palino upgrades his last coal mine, increases his population, takes the team sports and the computers. There is Bill Gates, Sid Meier's, Einstein, Marie Curie in the game, so probably it's nice to have that copy available, even though it is a bit expensive. He isn't taking Marlene, which probably Eepogi is happy to see, who just went for the opera. Eepogi is willing to see it, and another colony is revealed. Actually, all players are passing on it. Marta, I think, can't justify to lose another worker, and the others apparently also don't want to bid on that. Bit interesting for Eepogi. Maybe for one night it could have been fine, but I guess he thought about what influence it would have on his turn and decided against it. Maybe it wouldn't be that easily possible to rebuild and grab some important cards like the Air Forces, like maybe Marlene or maybe a Wonder or something. He's actually now going for an Air Force, builds one, builds even another one, making him the strongest now with 23 strength, and not a surprise, he is going for Marlene Dietrich here, can at some point go for more operas and use her military ability maybe quite nicely. Marta Seeds opens the Cold War. He's not part of that, so yeah, things are really not looking great for him at that point. The reserves might be a helpful card for him, but let's see how he will, what he will do. He will go for the communism. That, on the other hand, will again cause him some happy face issues. So probably will now go for the organized religion, I guess. Goes for an upgrade, takes Churchill to get an early replacement for Robespierre. Takes the reserves and actually uses Churchill for a bit of science discount on the Rifleman. And he loses 4 culture to famine, but I think he still has a bit of a culture lead, but it's quite close already. Palino seats and opens the National Pride, and I mean, Martin still had a 2 culture before Eepogi. That is enough to win that National Pride and now have a bit more of a culture lead again. Palino will start going for computers. Let's see if he will grab one of those lab leaders, and if he is going for Sid Meier, who is available for one civil action cheaper, or for Bill Gates, or if he is just waiting for one of them at the next turn, as both of his opponents have already committed to an H3 leader. So I guess an interesting question here for him. He could also grab a wonder like United Nations. There are not that many wonders left after his turn, or he could just spend his actions efficiently, but my guess would be, as Cook is not really doing that much, and as he maybe also can't do that much else with his turn, guess he can develop some text, play revolutionary deal, increase his population. He could do some stuff, but I think getting the additional resource from Gates already going this turn could be quite strong. Or he is actually going for Sid Meier. Will be very interesting to see. He is going for Bill Gates. I think it's still early enough that the resources will just have a higher impact. And yeah, he has now 17 resource production. He's falling a bit behind in culture, but if he can convert those resources nicely, he might still have a very good position. And hopefully, because I would of course like to get my guess correctly. Eepogi seats and opens the politics of strength. Mata getting hit by another strength event. Also bad timing. It would have been a perfect event, or not perfect of course, but it would have been better for him if that would have been revealed before his last turn, because last turn he didn't draw any cards anyway, because he did the Robespierre revolution to communism. Now he for the second time in a row won't draw any new cards, so that is quite annoying for him. Eepogi will increase his population, can increase it 2 times, could even increase it another time, so getting some nice value out of Maria Theresa. Goes for a cheap oil upgrade, has enough science to support it. It's relatively late, but I guess it can still be worth it, maybe especially if something like economic progress is coming. There are still 2 H2 events in the deck, one of them seeded by Eepogi, but economic progress of course now would maybe be even better for Palino. Mata seeds. Opens the impact of variety. That was actually seeded by Mata. It's giving him, no, it's a very low score for the impact of variety. Palino actually only having 8 in that one, so it turns out to be a fine impact for Mata. He will go for the tanks this turn. Maybe that allows him to go for a tactic also, or he can even go for tanks this turn already. He is increasing his population, is willing to have famine again this turn, builds a tank, takes the reserves, the movies, and adopts the Hussars tactic, so maybe he's planning to go for that soon, or he doesn't draw any cards anyways, maybe it's also a bit of a bluff and he has already Modern Army or something in hand. But yeah, he is still operating on a very low amount of population. Palino has a lot of science, will use it to go for the democracy. I think that will also be very helpful for him to have many more actions with Bill Gates. Goes for team sports, goes for the cavalryman, can develop a lot of text this turn, and let's see if he has a nice tactic. He has the classic army that makes him the strongest and also a little bit threatening in case he should get the military theory at the next turn. Eepogi seeds and a freedom of movement is revealed. He will use it to put an alchemy into opera, maybe as a preparation for Malene. He has still a nice amount of science saved up, doesn't need the alchemy maybe as much, goes for another upgrade to oil very cheaply with the yellow card, goes for the engineering, builds another opera, uses Maria's resources to go for another knight, is now the strongest, and then can actually go for the fundamentalism. I thought maybe he would go for an urban growth here, but a fundamentalism making him more threatening. Mortar still could be at a very vulnerable position. Maybe also to defend himself potentially from Palino, who maybe could have the potential to build up some big strength, maybe to go for war in 2 turns. And it's also quite cheap with the Acropolis, also could give them an additional urban building limit, so actually quite some arguments to go for that fundamentalism here. Mortar destroys another mine, uses the freedom of movement to put a scientific method into tanks, uses Churchill again, goes for a cannon. That indicates that maybe he has mechanized army, or maybe he's still modern army. Let's see. He goes for the Empire State Building, maybe plans on scoring some points, but in which area is he actually best? Maybe he can potentially win strength, but maybe it's also just a denial from Palino, I guess. Or now is at least that only one of his opponents will get any wonder. So probably a denial pick. Maybe he has some headspace issues anyway and doesn't have a lot else to do with his many actions. And he has indeed a mechanized army tactic that makes him even the strongest for now, so who knows, maybe he will be able to at least get 8 points out of the Empire State Building. But he again has famine, which is of course not great for him. The immigration is revealed, no one gets hit by that. Palino uses the freedom of movement to actually put an agriculture into computers. Interestingly, he didn't put a coal or something into computers. I think more food maybe could still be valuable, even though maybe he just doesn't have enough to get another population out. Probably he did some calculations about that, but yeah, he maybe with having that many labs with Bill Gates also wouldn't have needed a coal mine that much. Also, it would be quite a resource difference, so he could get the computer more cheaply, but who knows, maybe he would have corruption. Let's see how he plays his turn. He will go for the professional sports, the military build-up, the civil service, the military theory, maybe has something like impact of progress in hand or impact of government, goes for the civil service, takes the modern infantry, also impact of tech could maybe be an impact that he could be having. Let's take a quick look again at how the culture situation is. And at that point, Eepogi has already overtaken Mortar. Palino is still a bit behind, but he will get a relatively big Bill Gates bonus at the end and should score nicely in the impact. So for Mortar, I don't really see a big out here. And for Eepogi and Palino, maybe it will depend also a little bit on who gets the fast food chains and of course also who maybe draws some nice impacts. Eepogi opens the impact of strength, that of course being a nice one for Mortar, so he is scoring some culture here. Palino is falling behind now. Eepogi takes the tanks, builds another air force, takes the reserves, the revolutionary idea, and another copy of reserves. Is now the strongest. Now H4 starts. I think that will now cause even bigger famine issues for Matas. Let's see what he can do about it. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Extremely interesting, actually. There's actually a hybrid war declared here from Matar against Palino. But Palino has the Magic Castle, has that many resources. Did he leave himself somewhat vulnerable? Let's take a look, I guess. Matar is going for the patriotism, and maybe he will solve his famine issues with just having an uprising at the end of his turn. I would not be surprised by that. I think that could be a very solid move here. His production is not that big anyway, and destroying a farm is definitely an indicator. He will destroy a lab as well, uses Churchill, builds a cannon, another cannon, and I guess he can go for 2 air forces. So he can actually go for quite a big amount of strength here. Goes for that hybrid war, has an uprising. I still don't see too much hope for him, but he's at 81 strength now. Palino has some happy face issues. Let's see how much he will be able to defend, or he is willing to defend. He probably also wants to still score some points for impacts. But I mean, that war could also be quite deciding between Eepogi and Palino, of course. Because now that Palino has to defend against this war, I don't think it's looking quite bad for him to still have a shot against Eepogi. And of course, he might even potentially finish behind Mortar. But I still think Palino's position might just be scored too well in the impacts, so that maybe the war won't be enough. But let's see if maybe Mortar is pulling off the impossible here. And no, he would have a lot of famine, but with the uprising, the whole production is skipped, and the famine is part of the production phase, meaning he won't lose any culture. Palino gets a bit of help from Eepogi. Interesting that Eepogi accepts this pact, because as I just said, and it's of course mostly based on feelings, and the players who played the game probably did some calculations, but from my feeling, I would say that Palino could still be in the better position in Mortar, which would maybe lead to Eepogi not accepting this pact, so that Mortar steals even more culture from him. But let's see how if my feeling is right about that, if Palino will finish second at the end, and if maybe Eepogi could have also just not taken the pact. We can maybe, if he doesn't have to do anything for his politics phase, he can of course also cancel it again. But yeah, and I'm interested to see how that will play out. Palino goes for the modern infantry, destroys some stuff. Ooh, that will cost him some points for the Bill Gates bonus, so he is trying to maximize his defense here. At least how it looks like. He will go for 2 more cavalrymen. He could potentially have the shock troops tactic if he goes for more cavalrymen. That should be the case. Or does he just want to build more units? Oh, I guess. Wait, is he also going for an uprising here? Actually, he is also going for an uprising. He will win the war, but loses production. I guess he didn't have too much culture production anyway. But I mean, it's a bit of a sacrifice for his economy. Probably did the calculations, and he would just lose a lot more culture. And with getting hit by this war, as said, finishing before Eepogi, I think will be very difficult. So he has to be mainly focused about his position compared to Martin Pêcheur. And then, of course, it's even a big culture swing depending on how much he defends. So he's also actually willing to go for an uprising here. So quite quite a heavy hybrid war here at the end of the game. Eepogi seeds and opens the impact of culture. That gives him the most amount, and Martin again getting some points. So his position looks like it might get heavily punished through impacts, but so far he won the impact of strength, gets some points here from the impact of culture against Palino. So let's see if he can somehow sneak his way into the second place here. Eepogi will rebuild his farm, which helps him for impact of balance and also harmony. It takes the fast food chains, and that farm also will score some points for that fast food chains. And yeah, I think no way that Eepogi doesn't win that game, and I was maybe too optimistic of even considering that Palino might still have a shot. So Marta will lose some culture to Palino, but has still a bit of a lead. Palino now also maybe won't score as nicely in the impacts any longer. But Marta, of course, with having that much of famine, has to go for another uprising. It's just worth more than getting his production going. But I think he will still score the culture from Churchill, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he will get the culture from Churchill, but not his production. He played the endowment for, I think, 3 culture. So he did score some culture during his turn, but not really a lot. So let's see how much Palino will be able to do at his last turn. He seeds, and the impact of competition is revealed. I think is even a bit better for him than for Mortar, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he catches up 6 points to Mortar, gets closer already. He destroys the Rifleman, builds a religion, gets a bit more culture production, a preparation for impact of happiness, and ends his turn. And we can see that Mortar is having an 11 culture lead. Even with the Bill Gates bonus, he is still in front of Palino, but he hasn't seeded a single impact. And with that, I expect that Palino will overtake Mortar here. First, we have the impact of science. That, of course, is a really strong one for Palino. We have the impact of industry. That is actually quite bad for both Palino and Martin Pêcheur, so quite strong for Eepogi. We have the impact of tech. That I think might have been seeded by Palino. He gets even more points against Martin Pêcheur. And then there's the impact of balance. That's also not great for Martin. And the last impact is the impact of harmony. And with that, yeah. Eepogi wins this game by quite a lot. Palino, so my feelings about this were correct. Palino is at the second position here, and Marta is in the last position. So interesting that Eepogi accepted a pact. Maybe he, I'm not sure. I guess he was too much behind strength as that it would have helped him against an aggression. Maybe against an aggression from Palino, but I guess no. Then the pact would have been cancelled, and both of them getting some additional strength. So. Then we take a look at which player was closer to him in culture. He maybe shouldn't have accepted it, but maybe had some other reasons or just went with it anyway. For him, it didn't really make a big difference at the end. And also, even of course, with him rejecting the pact, Palino would still finish at the second position here. So an interesting ending here. A rough game for Marta. Losing lots of population, starting early in the game actually, with rats and pestilence, and then it just added up over the game. He had some issues, got hit by 2 wars over territory, and then at the end he had to go for this hybrid war with uprising to maybe still have a shot. It actually did quite a lot of damage to Palino. I think if Palino goes undisrupted, he at least has chances for the first place, I would say. I didn't do any calculations, but he could have maybe taken the wonder or something and had some nice impacts, gotten a bigger Bill Gates bonus. So that war, and Palino maybe not being ideally prepared for it, even though of course he was able to win it even at the end. So a bit unfortunate of course from his perspective, but I also still think it was probably or very likely Mortar's best shot that he had in order to still have a shot at scoring some points in this game. But for Palino of course a bit unfortunate, getting hit by that big hybrid war and then not really having any chance for the first place any longer. That of course sadly means that I wasn't able to score my hat-trick here. Sadly Mortar had to go for that hybrid war. I'm very disappointed in him. Now sadly Palino only finished second. I guessed him as the winner. Eepogi won this game and I guessed him as the second place. So sadly this time I didn't get the end result completely right. Alright, and actually thanks to Mortar sending me a screenshot that I didn't have taken that I did not take a look at yet, we can take now a look at the standings. I just have to get the screenshot very quickly. And it turns out that it is actually quite a good time to take a look at the standings. After that 3-player game, all of the 3-player games actually already have finished. I don't know exactly how all of the other ones have finished, but we know how the results are looking like after all 4 and all 3-player games having finished. And we can see that Mortar, despite losing the 3-player game that we just saw, is still at the first position with 16 points. Eepogi, with being able to win that game that we just saw, and also the one that we saw before, is on the second position with 13 points. Palino at the third position with 11 points, and Blunderteig is last with 8 points. I guess for Blunderteig it's not really possible any longer to win the group because the other players score some points by default. I guess maybe if he wins all 3 2-player games, he would be at 20 points. Maybe you can construct a scenario. I guess if Palino wins 2, Eepogi 1, Mortar none. I guess Blunderteig is still in the running, actually, if I did the math correctly. So every player can still win the group, so relatively tight, and I'm very interested to see how this group will end, which player will make it to the finals. We will be taking a look at one 2-player game from this group, but in the next video we will be taking a look at another 3-player game from group 3 and see how things are looking there. Alright, then I hope it was an interesting video for you. Thanks for watching, thanks for Mortar for sending me this screenshot. And yeah, then have a nice time and see you in the next video.